In high school, I wanted to be a musician. I was a guitar player. I was that guy walking around with the guitar through the hall. I had like, a few music classes, had a
Nice, man.
band.
So you're a ladies' man, basically.
That's what's up.
Dude, the ladies in music were shockingly below expectations. It might have had something to do with I was playing in metal bands.
Okay.
Most of our crop is going to concentrates, so we harvest fresh, get it into the freezers immediately. The more diversity that exists within a system, the more stable the system is. Everything we're producing on this farm just keeps like blowing our minds with how good it is. It's really difficult to convince a man of a concept when his income depends on his not understanding that concept.
California sober as they say, and lately I can't find no other way. I can't stay out and party like I did back.
Appreciate you for tuning back in. We are over here in Creemore. It's your boy Sean. I'm with my co-host Eric. We have been graciously invited to come to the farm by our boy Chris from Hog Wild. How you doing, man?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Thanks for coming up, guys.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you for having us, man. This is the most beautiful place, I think, nearby.
Yes. Close too.
Yeah, it was really magical coming up here last week as well for the tour. Got to see a lot of the Purple Hills. Got to see a lot of your farm. This is your first time up here?
This is my first time. I mean, I've driven through the area, but like we were driving and I'm like, I've never driven here before. So you're a little hidden out here, which is super cool.
Yeah, we kind of like it that way. We're
Yes.
a little bit out of sight, which is nice, but everything we need is close by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, Chris, why cannabis?
Why did I get into cannabis?
Yeah.
Well, I think I started probably like most people somewhere around high school or junior high. You kind of fuck around a little bit. Get up to know good with some of your friends, and that's what it was for me. So I've just been kind of casually using cannabis early on. We've had a bit of an on-off relationship. I've taken some breaks here and there, but really, I would say I got fascinated by growing in general, not just cannabis, but food crops, vegetables, fruit trees, raising livestock, and I got really passionate about the whole farming picture, which led me into this whole regenerative agriculture space, which is essentially just what's more of a much more traditional approach to growing. In the cannabis context, that means living soils, kind of creating your own fertility and working with an ecosystems paradigm. And ultimately, I got really passionate about the whole picture of the farm. And cannabis came along in Canada when it became recreationally legal. I had been trying to make a living full-time as a regenerative farmer and was having a lot of trouble making all the pieces fit financially. And we saw cannabis as the kind of what could be the key economic driver of a mixed farm like ours. So we ended up applying for a micro-cultivation license. For those who don't know, it's just a license that allows a grower to do about 200 square meters of canopy space. Cultivation only, though, so you end up selling wholesale to one of the standard license producers. But with the prices pre-legalization, it made a whole lot of sense to be able to get one of these licenses. I think anybody who's been following the legal cannabis scene in Canada knows that the prices today aren't quite what they used to be. But we went ahead, we applied for 3 micro cultivation licenses, and so we've got 3 licensed sites on our farm. We're growing a little over 400 plants a year, and we end up yielding something about 3 kilograms per plant wet weight. So we do, most of our crop is going to concentrates, so we harvest fresh, get it into the freezers immediately, and then it goes down to the hills to our friends at Purple Hills. Ends up in their concentrates, yeah.
Nice. When did you make the transition out here?
So I was living in Toronto until 2019, working a full-time job and commuting to a farm property I had on weekends. So that was since 2014. So 2014 was kind of when I first really started getting my hands dirty, so to speak, in this whole world of agriculture and growing. But it was a part-time thing, kind of a hobby thing. 2019 is when we made the leap full-time, and this is how I make my living here ever since then. Yeah.
Nice.
Unreal. And you guys are doing full outdoor,
Full-term outdoor.
full
yeah.
sun.
Yeah, full sun.
Nice.
We don't use any herbicides, pesticides, any synthetic fertilizers of any kind. In fact, all the fertility that we use everywhere on our farm is made here on site. So we have basically a composting program. We do both thermophilic or hot composts, as well as worm castings. We do indigenous microorganism collections, kind of all the Korean natural farming methods. So essentially what we're doing is trying to get as much diversity in our farm biologically as possible. So we want as many different microorganism species in our soils as possible, all the fungi, all the bacteria, all the nematodes, all the protozoa, all the small insects, earthworms, birds, reptiles, plant species. As much diversity as possible is what we're aiming for. And then we're looking at examples of current ecosystems that are robust and resilient without our intervention. And we're trying to take the observations from those natural ecosystems. How do they function? How do they work? How are they productive? And try to apply those principles in a farming context here on our farm. And so nature doesn't use fertilizers. Nature
Right.
doesn't irrigate.
Supports itself.
Yeah, other than rainwater. And most of the work at the soil level, the decomposition and conversion of non-available plant nutrients into plant-available nutrients is done by the microorganisms that should be living in the soil. Unfortunately, most of the conventional practices wipe out their populations. So things like plowing up the soil, using heavy equipment like that's going to compact your soil can be a problem. Leaving soils completely bare and exposed to direct sunlight is going to make them crusty. It's going to reduce your water infiltration into your soil. So you're going to get less water in, and you're also going to retain less water. And then obviously like herbicides, insecticides, these are things that are essentially like they're antibiotics, right? And so they're killing all the microorganisms that would be in the soil. So what we're doing is just looking at how do we avoid disrupting their populations? How do we avoid killing them? And then how do we help give them a little leg up and improve the population sizes and the diversity of different kinds of microbes on the farm?
I think one of the things that attached me to soil and living soil and the whole big picture is the plant is going to eat what it wants to eat as long as it's there to be eaten.
Right.
So when you're feeding a plant through bottles, which a lot of people do really well,
Sure.
you're spoon feeding the plant.
Yeah.
You're like, here, readily available nutrients, here you go, eat it. Hopefully the plant likes that. When you're feeding with soil, you're just giving the soil the food, and then the plant's going to take what it wants to. And not everything is readily available. It needs to be broken down. It needs to become readily available. So I've always said for like the home grower, grow living soil. It's the easiest approach because you can let it do it for you as long as you know how to set the groundwork for it. So
Yeah, I often say the conventional paradigm is really one that maximizes control, right? So if you're an indoor grower, you want to control your humidity, you want to control your room temp, you're controlling your lighting, you're controlling your water, you're controlling your water pH, you're controlling your soil pH, you're controlling your nutrients, you're controlling your pests, you're trying to keep everything sterile, completely sterile. Whereas in an outdoor approach, it's really about relinquishing control, but doing what you can to create the environment that lets the soil take care of itself, kind of like you said. And I agree, it's actually much more complex, but it's also a lot simpler.
for sure.
If it's set up nicely and you don't have any issues, it actually kind of runs itself.
Gets better with time.
And it gets better with time. Yeah.
Just,
So
I think one of the most underrated parts of it is like the more you leave it untouched or no-till, I guess, if we use that term as well, like it's just going to get better and better and better.
And that's what you're doing with the compost as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So just to finish what you're saying, as long as you've got the biology in your soils, it's going to get better and better. And some people will occasionally unwittingly do things that are going to diminish their microbe populations, despite having, the best intentions. And that's where it can get a little tricky sometimes, is just, watering with chlorinated water or something is a good example of something that it's like, whoops, or using, I've had a few people have used non-organic straw, and they're actually having trouble composting it and having it break down properly.
Wow. Interesting.
Or mulch or things like that. It doesn't break down as nicely as it could or should, just because, it's been sprayed and there's no microbes on it.
So you use wood chips as your mulch layer.
Yeah, on our cannabis, we use wood chips. So, couple reasons. One, we're really trying to promote a fungally balanced cannabis bed. So, this maybe is getting into the weeds a little bit, but there's essentially certain soil types or certain crop types that are going to like a soil type that has more of a bacterial population in it and not a lot of fungi. And then there are other environments like a forest that's going to want really high amounts of fungi, less bacteria relative to the fungi.
Mm-hmm.
And cannabis is more of a fungi-friendly kind of a plant. It likes to be more of the one-to-one, like balanced fungi and bacteria populations, if not a little higher on the fungal end.
Okay.
And so the wood chips makes an environment that's more like a forest floor. And we actually collect fungi from our local forest. So we have this basically the hobby where we take out collection boxes into the woods. They're filled with half-cooked rice, and we go hunting for evidence of mycelium, which is just little bits of fungi that you can see with your eye. And if you move across some forest floor, like you move some leaves out of the way or you roll a dead log over, you can actually find these little white strands. And if we plant one of our collection boxes there, we can come back in about a week's time. And if it's a good spot, our whole rice will be inoculated with this white fuzz that's like penicillin. And then we'll go to different local areas like riverside. We'll go on hilltops. We'll go in forests, conifer forests, deciduous forests, and we'll get different collections from different areas. And then we'll come back here and we'll make basically a compost that's meant to breed out all those different fungal collections.
Sick.
Wow.
Which will also have other microbes in it. Like it's not like we're selecting out other stuff. And so you're getting this great diversity of local, native, indigenous microbes. We grow that out, and then that can get mixed into our compost pile.
Right.
And then that means the soils that we get in our gardens as we spread our compost is going to have a lot more fungi. So we want to create that environment. So by using the wood chip mulch, it creates the fungi, saprophytic fungi, which are the specific fungi that break down organic matter. They're decomposers. They really like high lignin materials, which is what's in wood chips. So our kind of, other plants like the straw and stuff is going to be high cellulose, and bacteria and fungi break them down, but the fungi really specifically go after the woody materials.
Nice.
So it's a really long-winded way of saying we're trying to create the environment for the fungi in the cannabis gardens, and so we use wood chips as a mulch. It serves that purpose, and then any mulch, but in our case, wood chips, is really going to help with your water conservation. So when it rains, when the water hits the wood chips, because they're big and chunky, it can infiltrate into the soil. It can get through the wood chips, percolate down, and soak up in the soil. And then the wood chips are going to act like a layer that prevents the sun from evaporating the moisture, right? So it's acting as an insulating blanket. So we're not getting our water to evaporate out. And then as the wood chips break down over time, because the fungi are eating them up and breaking them down, they're adding organic matter to our soil.
Right.
And every 1% increase in organic matter in your soil, you get 1.5 liters of water holding capacity in your soil.
I remember you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the organic matter makes your soil more like a sponge, so it can hold more water every time it rains, which means and then it can wick it out, right, as the root takes it.
So there'd be like no droughts eventually, pretty much.
Yeah, so you're making yourself more drought tolerant, and then the common thing that comes up is like, oh, well, what my soil's I don't have enough drainage. Well, the chunky organic matter. So organic matter is just things that were once alive that are now dead, and they're on their way to being broken down into soil again, but they're not all the way there yet. So it's little bits of like a wood chip or a little piece of shredded up leaf, whatever it is, but it's big and chunky, right? So relative to the soil that's surrounding it, there's going to be some air pockets, which is going to allow for water to drain out. So even though you're making your soil more like a sponge and it can hold more water, it also is going to have better drainage. So if you get into a situation where there's too much water, it's not going to turn into a boggy mess and become anaerobic, or at least it's going to be less so than if the organic matter wasn't present.
I mean, we could probably talk about mulch for 45 minutes, but do you guys, and I know you got the chance to go to the farm recently, but do you guys do any companion planting, any cover crops alongside?
In the cannabis garden, so in a perfect world where I had exclusive ability to do whatever I want without interference, 100% I would. But in our case, because of the license we have is a micro cultivation, we're not maximized by the number of plants we can grow. We're capped by the space.
The space, the canopy space, right?
Yeah, so we're just maximizing as many plants as we can comfortably get in to that space. So
gotcha.
everybody's like getting right up to each other, and we're pruning things back so that it's not a complete jungle. But in our case, no, we're not. But everywhere else on the farm, you'll see massive diversity in plant types.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we did. So we, and people probably got to see it on Instagram a while ago, but we did a 3x3 bed of soil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were trying to build to grow cannabis in. We did 3 or 4 runs in it. And so what did we use as mulch? We used a little bit of rice hulls, which were also in the soil.
Sure.
We did some straw, which I had a lot of trouble breaking down. So when you said that before, I was like, interesting.
Yeah, it stays.
Whereas we use the straw because of Build a Soil. Shout out to Build a Soil because they've probably taught us everything we know, but they got their straw from a mushroom farm.
Okay.
And then they washed it so that it was, I forget the exact reason, and maybe you would know why they had to like, they couldn't use it just raw from having the mushrooms in it. They had to do some type of flush to the straw in order to use it for mulch. Not sure what it is, but that was so rich fungally, which is obviously perfect for cannabis cultivation. And are you a reader at all?
A reader?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know what book it was, because we've talked about fungally dominated soils for cannabis and why it's important just in our cultivating at home.
The Soil Food Web?
Teaming with microbes?
Teaming with microbes.
So that whole series.
Read several times.
Yeah, that whole series is kind of what brought a lot of that stuff to light for me. But is it that a lot of annual plants prefer fungally dominated?
Totally. So it's probably not perfect, but the model they present is essentially this idea of succession, right? So if you were just to like clear cut a complete area, what's going to pop up first? It's going to be a lot of like broad leafy weeds and what they'd call early successionals, and they are annuals. So they're going to pop up one year, produce seeds in that year, drop their seeds, and then die, and they don't come back. And so if you wanted to plant them, you'd have to plant them every year. And so in the vegetable garden, early things are going to be like cabbages and leafy greens. And these kind of things are going to like a really bacterially dominated soil, more alkaline leaning versus acidic. And that might like a tilled up soil that's not going to have a lot of fungal stuff, and it's going to have a lot more bacterial stuff. And then as you kind of carry on, the next things eventually you're going to start getting things that'll be like grasses or row crops like corn and cereal grains and things like that. They're going to like a soil that's more fungally balanced. So it's got some bacteria and it's got some fungi, and they're in relatively even proportions to each other. Or still a little on the bacterial side. And then as we start getting some shrubs and perennial things, so, like different bushes, they're going to like to get a little more fungally dominant, like maybe 5-to-1 fungi to bacteria, up to 10-to-1. And then you'll get your pioneer trees, and then you'll get, forests forming, and eventually you'll get into your conifers, and you'll get to old growth. And so by the time you get there, you're up to 100-to-1 fungi to bacteria.
Wow.
Up to 1,000-to-1 fungi to bacteria. But you're not going to grow the things that are early successional. You're not going to find those things in an old conifer forest, right? And you're not going to find conifer trees just randomly popping up in somebody's vegetable garden.
Right.
There's some kind of transition from these types of environments. And a lot of that is just, a time scale. Like if you just left a field to go wild, some fields will stop at kind of pasture, but most things will eventually kind of start getting some trees and convert back to a forest, depending on kind of the climate in the area and whatnot. But that's what's really fascinating is once you get that concept, and then you have some tools, for instance, like composting methods, you can kind of tune a compost to be more bacterial by flipping it very often, because that's going to disrupt the fungal populations. Mm-hmm. You can make it fungally dominant by maybe just doing one flip and then leaving it cold, adding in some indigenous microbes you might have collected from a forest, and then throwing some worms in it and just letting the worms and the fungi break down the rest of the material. And then that compost, and you can measure all these things if you want. You can send them in for lab tests, or you can do microscope work.
Yes. We did that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. To kind of see what kind of organisms you can see. Can you actually find evidence of fungal hyphae in your fungal compost But then you can put your fungal compost out on your trees, right? If you've got some trees in your yard, or if you're like me and you've planted a little fruit orchard, you can use your fungal compost for those kind of things. And you can use your bacterial composts for your cabbage and your lettuces and peas and things like that. It becomes like this major hippie nerdy science experiment.
It's the best, man. It's the best.
It's the best, yeah. And then, but what hooks you, what makes you continue to do it and keep going, is when you start tasting the products you create. Because that's the difference. Like in our cannabis, we're getting these unreal terpene profiles and high terpene counts. In our fruit, you're just getting like the juiciest, most delicious fruit. In our pork, like we just put salt on our pork and we grill it. It doesn't need any rubs. It doesn't need any sauce. Everything we're producing on this farm just keeps like blowing our minds with how good it is. Forget about all the environmental benefit. Forget about all the other reasons we want to do it. It just tastes better. It smells better. It smokes better.
It's supposed to.
It's supposed to.
That's the part that's frustrating to me, is that when you do taste a difference in, let's just say, a fruit or even a vegetable that you grew, and you're like, why? Yeah. Why does our food taste like nothing? It's because it's not rich in minerals. It's got a fraction of what it's supposed to, right?
Yeah, most things, like you can look through the literature and you'll see that minerals in food in North America and vegetables and crops has been in decline basically since the 1940s, which is roughly when kind of chemical agriculture started becoming a real thing, shortly after World War II. And again, like it's, you can make case and argument like we're growing more food than we've ever grown before. Farms are more productive. There's lots of good arguments that can be made for kind of conventional ag and conventional growing, but definitely we're operating out of a different paradigm, and we're not trying to say, everybody should be doing it this way or we're better.
Yes.
But the quality of the food that we're producing, and we're going to have some lab tests done next year, but just from a taste perspective, like I know I'm onto something basically. Like there's just it's just undeniable
for sure
that this makes food that's of a higher quality, and cannabis as well. That's
one of my grandparents does strawberries, and they do nothing. They don't feed, and they just kind of like have had this garden that breaks down every year, and it's just their soils become super rich, and that. So it's cool to see because they don't even know they're doing that.
Right.
But I go to see it and I'm like, oh my God, the soil looks a little different. It's a little darker this year.
Yeah.
But the food tastes incredible.
100%.
It's insane to me.
Yeah. I was going to say you can get really lucky by adopting a good spot, right? Or just not having done anything bad. Like if your parents or grandparents had this place for 30, 40, 50 years, that's one thing. But what happens when you get your new place and maybe you get a couple acres and it's been being farmed conventionally for the last 30, 40, 50 years? Now you're not just working from a blank template, you're working from something that's actually been quite degraded.
To work against it.
Yeah, and that's where all these tools and all this knowledge really comes in handy, because you can rapidly increase soil health if you know what you're doing and you have the right tools in your toolbox. Because we might not all just get that spot that's already been cared for wonderfully by the person that was there before us.
For sure.
But
I can see, like, even on like the way your farm is set up, like you have everything is to help each other out.
Yeah.
What's
like
that
the way you've laid it
documentary?
out.
Because I know you've seen it on Netflix. I think it's called Feed the Ground.
Oh, Kiss the Ground.
Kiss the Ground. That's what it is. You've seen that.
100%.
For sure. So there's another one on Netflix that's similar, and I don't know if
Biggest Little Farm?
Yeah, that one's really good as well.
Yeah.
So it might have been that one where the whole documentary, if nobody's seen it, and gosh, please watch it. I don't know. I think I've told you to watch it a couple times.
I can't remember.
I know you're not
probably.
a movie guy, so
those would be the good ones. I'd say like Food Inc. is probably the one
Food
back
Inc.
in like, I don't know what it was, maybe
I think
2010,
everyone's seen
2012.
that, yeah.
That was one of the big ones. Kiss the Ground and Biggest Little Farm will do a good job giving everybody a good visual representation of what this regenerative picture is all about. But I say, like in a nutshell, I say it's about increasing biological diversity, keeping the ground covered, and finding symbiotic relationships between enterprises. So nature, like we're using examples of natural ecosystems as our model or as our template. And what you keep seeing is symbiotic relationships between different species, both between plant species and microbes, and also different animal species with other animal species and plants. So like one example that you would have remembered from the tour, we've got our egg-laying hens running behind our pigs, right? So all the animals, all the animals on the farm, we rotationally graze. So we give them areas inside, we set up electric fencing to define a certain area that they're going to occupy for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And then we're going to move them to a brand new area, and they don't go backwards. So they're doing a migration around the property, and the pigs will only be on the same spot once per year for 3 days. So they make a big impact, and then they're gone. And they put down a lot of manure in the time that they're there, and they dig up and root through some things. And normally on a farm, when you have big animals, you're going to have a ton of manure flies everywhere, and it's going to smell and whatnot. But, you know, you guys can tell.
Yeah, it smells fresh out here, guys.
It smells fresh. So
the chickens.
The idea is that the chickens are coming 3 days behind the pigs. So we're moving them where the pigs were 3 days ago, and it takes flies eggs that they lay in manure. It takes their eggs about 3 days to go from the egg into the wiggly larvae stage, which is totally disgusting. But the chicken wants nothing more than to peck through that pig manure, pull out those larvae and eat them.
Wow.
And we're not asking the chicken to do anything it doesn't want to do. We're actually respecting the essence of what it is to be a chicken.
It's a delicacy.
Because that chicken just wants to eat crickets and grasshoppers and earthworms and insect larvae that it digs up itself through the ground. Yeah, that chicken's just going to scratch and scrape and peck all day long, and it will prefer that to the feed that we actually supplement them with. And so by doing that, we're increasing the protein content in the chicken's feed. It's harvesting the feed itself, so we don't have to put any labor into it. It's lowering my feed cost as the farmer because it's getting more food. And then it's keeping the pests off the pigs, right? There's less flies. And it's also spreading out the pig manure, improving the fertility of the pig manure.
They're tampering with it, and it's, I got you.
Right, so you reduce the feed cost, you improve the feed quality, which means the egg quality improves, and you reduce pest pressures just by putting two animals in a good relationship to each other, you know, distance-wise.
So maybe, and this is just coming to me now, maybe the easiest way to explain it is biological diversity brings balance.
So, yeah, it's a fundamental ecological principle, is that the more diversity that exists within a system, the more stable the system is. Right? So if you have several different kind of small herbivores, several kinds of predators for each of them, several kinds of insects, if some kind of pest or pathogen shows up, there's a good chance there's already a predator for it, or a competitor, or even multiple competitors that compete for the same resources.
Right.
So if that pathogen or pest shows up, it's not going to blow up into an infestation or to, you know, a complete kind of shit show. It'll just be there trying to like find its place in the ecosystem. But as you narrow biological diversity and you have less different species, and a pest shows up, all of a sudden it's got a field of corn and it loves corn, right? Or a disease shows up and it's like, oh, this is exactly the condition I like, and it just wipes out your entire crop, spreads everywhere. And especially if you have plants that are mineral deficient, right? So we're going into a lot of places here.
That's okay.
But what a lot of people do, have you guys ever heard of taking a brick score off of your plants?
Yes, bricks. And I forget, it doesn't have anything to do with the sugars, sorry.
It does.
It does?
Yeah, so
okay,
the
nice.
refractometer is the tool that you use. So refractometer, if you guys remember science class, refraction is like if you put your arm into water and you look down at your arm in the water, the arm above the water looks like it's, you know, coming into the water, and then all of a sudden the arm in the water is like 3 inches away. And it's like, what's going on? Why is my arm over there? That's refraction, right? Because as light's hitting the water, it's changing from an air medium into a water medium. And so visually it looks like it's in a different spot. And as the sugar content there's no sugar in the ocean, but if, you know, as sugar content increases in a liquid medium, it's going to change the viscosity or the density of the water. So there's this little tool you can get called a refractometer. You're going to squeeze the juice out of a cannabis leaf. You can use any leaf, but if you want to test your cannabis plants, you'll squeeze the juice out of your cannabis leaf. A lot of people use a garlic press. They'll like kind of roll it up, pound it up a bit, and then press it through a garlic press. And you can just get a drop of juice, put it on your refractometer, and then there's a scale as you look through a lens. The more sugar that's in the liquid, the higher it's going to read on your scale because the light is bending more. And so basically people say anything kind of below an 8 on the scale is going to be a pretty unhealthy plant, and it's going to be very prone to getting consumed by pests and disease. But as the sugar score goes up, it means your plant's cell walls are going to be stronger. Higher sugar content is also associated with higher mineral content, so you're more likely to have like a firmer, more resilient plant. And so once you get up to a 12, most people will say your plant is virtually pest resistant at that point, and you're not going to find any attack on a plant with a brick score of 12 or higher.
Wow.
And at a 14, people are like, you've got a healthy, beautiful plant, and you're going to 100% taste it. And so when we tested our cannabis throughout the season, we were averaging a 16 on a brick scale in the cannabis.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yes, that's incredible.
Yeah,
So
big number.
yeah, but it's a tool you can use to measure sugar content. That's going to give you an indication of the pest resilience, but also the soil quality, right? If you have a really good, well-balanced soil that's super healthy, your plants are they're gonna automatically have a better brick score. And a refractometer, don't quote me, it's something in the neighborhood of like $40 to $60. So in terms of like tests you can do yourself at home, it's super cheap. It's not going to give you all the information you need, but it's one tool in the toolbox that's going to give you, some direction if you're trying to figure out what's going right and what's going wrong.
And are these scents of cannabis coming from the farm right now? Is this?
Yeah.
I get
We're
a couple whiffs here and
probably,
there.
I don't know, we're maybe 200 meters away from the grow. So like,
Okay. So it's super close. I got you. Because I keep getting little whiffs, and it's yes, and it's kind of happening as you drive through a couple neighborhoods right now as well, because everybody's plants are getting there. But
totally.
When are you harvesting?
So we'll probably be pulling down some things towards the end of next week, some of the earlier stuff. And then usually first week and second week of October is where we're getting the bulk of the plants down.
Right.
Nice.
We're getting close too.
Yeah, definitely. We're looking through the microscope.
Yeah.
Check for the heads.
We did a breeding project last year by accident, but I like to say that we did a breeding project. I had a black domina male pop up outside.
Yeah.
Thought it was a female.
Yeah.
But it didn't change. It was a full male. So I was like, you know what? Every time we grow outdoor every year, we end up not smoking a lot of it, and we're trying to find something for rosin. We've kind of jumped into that world a little bit more. So I said, let me see what it can do. We had 2 Runts phenos beside it, and then we just got tons of seeds from it. So we popped a bunch of them this year.
There's 2 popped outside
And
in my backyard right
they're
now.
pretty interesting
doing
so
well.
far, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I know Black Domina brings a shorter flowering cycle for outdoor, which is what we're looking for. It also, I know, has some mold-resistant features, which is great for our climate. And you're a little bit up north here as well, so I don't know. This is
a different spot, man. Like I think this is like a sweet spot that
We've
you guys
got our
have
own
here.
unique thing going on, being up high on a hill. Like we get some pretty aggressive winds, which at first we thought was going to be issues, but it actually leads to some really fat stalks on the plants.
It's the stressors that it needs. Environmental stress is the stress it should have.
Yeah, which is another one of these big principles for us is you want stress followed by rest, right? So you want to be able to dose stress appropriately to your plants or your anything on your farm, your soil included. But it can't be too much stress, right? Too much stress, and it can't be chronic stress that's there all the time. If it's like I often relate things, I have a history in the health and fitness world.
That's what I was gonna say. Is going to the gym.
But it's very much like working out. Like if you wanted to improve your cardio and you decided I'm going to start running a marathon a day every day for a month, you're basically going to be dead before the month is up, right? It's too much stress too often. But if you just started, doing some 5Ks a few times a week here and there, doing some shorter runs, doing some longer runs, and making sure you're resting between workouts and you're giving yourself enough time between workouts, eventually you're going to get faster and stronger and your cardio is going to improve. If you don't work out at all, nothing's going to improve. There's no stress to adapt to, right? The whole idea, the reason we make, like as humans, we'd make physical progress in the gym is because we're trying to adapt to our surroundings, right? And that's very similar to what the plants in the soil are doing.
Right.
It's just this constant dance of trying to adapt and survive. And so again, there just needs to be some kind of stress that's imposed that's not too great, and followed by the adequate recovery period or rest period, and then stressed again. And again, we're not in control of the wind, but that's generally kind of how it comes about.
For sure.
You get a few big stormy days, Sometimes it scares you a little bit. You get one or two plants that may even uproot a bit, but those ones that actually get uprooted, it's like it's almost like training where
You have a couple that did it this year.
they end up blowing up and becoming our bushiest plants.
Right. It's like a little LST by nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess something that would be good for us to do before I ask you 1,000 more soil questions is, I guess let's take it back to like high school, getting into the fitness world, because I'm sure that there's a part of fitness and there's a part of what you're in now that very much meshed together.
Sure.
So I think that there's probably something that kind of came about in your life that called you to this. But what's high school like for you? What's grade 12? Where do you think you're going in life and compared to now?
Yeah, everything is totally different. Never necessarily would have expected that I would have landed where I landed, doing what I'm doing. In high school, I wanted to be a musician. I was a guitar player. I was that guy walking around with the guitar through the hall. I had a few music classes, had a band.
So you're a ladies' man, basically.
That's what's up.
Dude, the ladies in music were shockingly below expectations. It might have had something to do with I was playing in metal bands.
Okay.
But
Little niche.
yeah, I probably started playing guitar to get girls and was just so let down by the reality of what it turned out to be.
It's funny. You never have expectations, guys.
Yeah.
That's the moral of the story.
There you
Yeah,
go.
lower your expectations and you'll always be pleasantly surprised.
There you go.
But anyways, yeah, tried to make a go of it in the music world. I went to a recording engineering program, so I was basically learning how to run a recording studio. Worked in a recording studio for about a year. Ended up going back to college for jazz performance just because I was trying to find a way to not get a real job yet and take one more crack at making it as a musician before I finally kind of realized, oh, there's like 10,000 other guitarists just in this city that are as good as me or better, plus the next city, plus, there's just like very few well-paying jobs available for musicians, and it's kind of a tough grind. And I kind of got to the point where it's like, you know what, I do this because I love it, and if I'm attaching the stress of making my livelihood from it, it kind of is taking a lot of the pleasure out. And I was like, I can keep this as a hobby and find something else I'm good at to make my living from.
Do you still play?
Yeah, here and there,
Nice.
a little bit.
You play with Johnny?
No, you know what? Like, if I play, it's just by myself for like 10 to 12 minutes.
Nice.
Because I've got a 15-month-old little girl. We grow cannabis. We've got pigs. We've got chickens.
Couple
we've got
things on the
honeybees.
You got
agenda.
shit to do.
We have got an Airbnb, so I don't have a lot of free time and social time. But fortunately, I love pretty much everything I do
Nice.
all day.
Man. Nice.
I can tell, man.
Yeah.
I can tell.
But yeah, getting back to it. So I kind of left music behind, was kind of jobless and more or less homeless, and I just stumbled into a gym because at the same time I was kind of having like some personal health stuff, and I'd made a decision that it was like need to like start focusing on eating well and exercising. So I joined a gym, and in high school I was athletic. I actually coached gymnastics for a few years. So I joined this gym, although I didn't have a job and I wasn't totally sure how I was going to pay for it. I was talking to one of the personal trainers and just saying like, hey man, what do you need to do to be a trainer anyways? And he was like, oh, you just have to take this weekend course. He's like, in fact, we're hiring right now. If you want, I can introduce you to the manager.
Nice.
And talked to the manager at this gym, and he asked me a few questions, and essentially was like, well, he's like, you know about as much as I thought you knew, which is not that much, but you look pretty good in a tight shirt. So if you can take the course and pass it, we'll give you a shot and see how you do, basically.
Nice.
And so I was so insecure about not knowing very much. And I had previously been like practicing guitar very seriously. So it was like hours a day of guitar. So I was like, well, now that guitar practice is over, I should probably be studying fitness if that's what my job is. And like I said, I just assumed every trainer knew fucking everything. And I was just like, completely landed in the situation where I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And anyway, so I started just study. And I ended up becoming the manager of the training department in that gym within the first year, and then graduated to some kind of bigger clubs. Ended up really taking the study stuff seriously. I took just a ton of training courses, nutrition courses, read a ton of books, listened to a ton of podcasts, all that stuff. and got in a position where I ended up managing a training department in a sports medicine clinic. So it was like physios, chiros, sports medicine doctors. They had a couple surgeons on staff, and I was running the gym there. And it really ended up turning to a focus on rehab-based exercise. And kind of like I've discovered in the agriculture world, I kind of felt like the kind of model in exercise and rehab, it seemed like there were some kind of gaps or some holes, or like just things weren't adding up. I was kind of getting exercise protocols from doctors and, works fine on this patient, but not at all on this patient. And is this guy supposed to, like, this guy's like 67 and hasn't worked out since high school. He's kind of heavy. And this person's like a 28-year-old female athlete.
Right.
And they both had the same injury, but it's like, it's not the same person. Like, I don't feel like this guy couldn't do a lunge on his best day before his injury, right? And this girl can do like them with 100 pounds on her back.
Right.
So, I ended up getting really deep. And the thing to me was like, oh, it's the paradigm seems to be off. And so I ended up adopting this kind of what I would say is like an ecosystems approach to human health, which is like, it's not just about exercise. It's not just about nutrition, and it's not just about sleep quality. It's all of the things. It's the total environment, right? And a lot of people, I would especially say, a lot of people's pain is manifesting from other areas of their life that are, not optimal, unsatisfactory, right? Like if they've got a lot of relationship trouble, or they don't have a sense of purpose in their job, or whatever it is. Like, as humans are social creatures, right? So some amount of what ails us has kind of a psychological basis. Some amount of it has a physical and a mechanical basis, right? Like people do tear muscles, people do injure things. Some of it's related to like inflammation, chronic inflammation from exposure to just toxic substances in the environment, which is, it's kind of a statement that makes you sound a little woo-woo, but we are exposed to all kinds of things in our environment, from air pollution to skin products that we're rubbing on our skin.
Right. I stopped using laundry soap.
Yeah, there you go.
I only use white vinegar, and we use like lavender, essential oils and stuff like that to bring some type of scent to, because sometimes it doesn't feel like it's clean.
Sure.
But I think it's just us transitioning to not using it. But
Sure.
That's something that I've adopted very recently, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
But yeah, there's a tremendous amount of products that we're using, and we don't know how all these things interact with each other. Because there's an expression in medicine that the dose makes the poison, right?
Yep.
If you give this drug in this dose, it's not even effective, right? If you give it in this dose, it should be effective for most people. And if you give it in this dose, you might kill someone.
Wow.
And there's a very little range where it's optimal, right? Anything below that, above that is just, it's not worth it. Why are you taking it?
Totally. And so when we're talking about like, say skincare products, and it's like, well, there's this ingredient that we know is, say, carcinogenic or is associated with XY disease, but it's only in this small dose, so it doesn't matter. It's going to be benign. But what about when you couple that with the 8 other skincare products you're using, and your laundry soap, and your dish detergent, and the stuff that's sprayed on the food we're eating, and some of the air pollution, and and we don't know how all these things accumulate.
Absolutely.
Right? And so anyways, the approach to health is essentially like a multifactorial approach. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the physical components, so things like exercise, things like we're focusing on human nutrition and making sure you're eating a diet that's giving your cells the things they need to repair and recover. We're focusing on making sure you're getting enough sleep, that the relationship stuff in your life is good, kind of all the basics and the fundamental things. And then, like I said, avoiding toxic exposures as much as you can.
Which is such a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of effort.
Basically impossible.
Right.
But the more, again, because it is the dose makes the poison, the idea is not to let perfect be the enemy of good, right? Like whatever the things you can do, you may as well start doing.
Yeah.
And they're all going to have a benefit. And the journey kind of just keeps going over time.
So when you're working in fitness and health, you establish yourself in that industry. Sounds like found some comfort in it, I would imagine, and maybe that felt like that was it. You're like, I'm in fitness now. But then
well, it was a great job, kind of better than I deserved in terms of like the income I was able to make doing it, and just the lifestyle. Like I worked in great gyms. I had great clientele. It was really rewarding generally, but at the same time, in studying health, it really ultimately connected me back to how our food is grown and agriculture. And I'd just been reading some of the kind of mineral content in food has been declining rapidly since the 1940s. And so as I started looking at people who were like educators in the agricultural world, I kind of stumbled into this regenerative agricultural paradigm. And so learning about how these guys were doing what I'm doing now, right, which is like their approach to raising livestock and following an ecological model and looking at nature as their example, all of it looked so cool and fascinating. And then the more I started reading about it, the more fascinated I became. And then also the lifestyle aspect, right? So I'm like, man, like, because as a trainer, I'm thinking about you want to be getting as much fresh air as possible throughout the day. You want to get exposure to natural sunlight for vitamin D and also to trigger your circadian rhythm. So we actually take cues from sunlight on when we produce certain hormones and compounds to bring on sleep, to change our body temperature, all these kind of things. We get cues from the sun, right? And physical exercise, right? I made a living as a trainer, and so people are coming in for 1 hour workouts, but I'll tell you 100%, you're way better off getting like 3 15-minute sessions through the day, or even just some amount of movement constantly through the day, rather than sitting for 8 hours, working out for an hour, and then going back to sitting, driving home.
It's mostly what you do out of the gym that makes most of the difference, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like you could be like, oh, I worked out twice this week, or it's like I worked out every day for 20 minutes this week.
Yeah.
Right.
In terms of, especially in terms of injuries and achiness, like you feel much more mobile, much more like a cat when you're getting regular movement often. It's not that, a 1 hour workout is bad and you should stop doing it.
Right.
But yeah, I think you guys understand what I'm saying.
For sure.
And so
this guy's in the gym for 2 hours sometimes. So
I mean,
not anymore.
I stopped. Yeah,
Not
that was
anymore,
uni days.
but-
I mean, I wasn't studying in uni. That's what I was doing. I was working
sure.
out and making food and traveling the world.
yeah, and listen, nothing wrong with going to the gym. I think exercise
For sure.
is wonderful. I think 1 hour workouts or 2 hour workouts are great. If you're doing them, keep doing them. But try to sneak in a little what the fitness world is calling movement snacks. But in terms of what I'm talking about, I was like, oh, if I'm not just driving a tractor back and forth down a field, but I'm actually, you're getting out and moving. Like I'm moving fences for the animals. We're using hand tools in the garden. So we're very low on the mechanization on this farm. I got a little garden tractor that I use to blow the snow and turn my compost pile over. But most of what we do in the gardens is all hand tools. So we're moving, we're using wheelbarrows to move around wood chips and compost. We're out in the fields. We're taking down fences for the animals. We're moving them around. Basically all day, all throughout the year, you're outside from morning until pretty much dark. Your body's moving regularly, and then you're producing higher quality food. So as I started investigating this lifestyle, and having grown up in Northern Ontario, I'm from North Bay, I was just like, this sounds like me. Like, this sounds perfect. This sounds like what I'm telling my clients like they should be doing. And then I was fascinated by the whole approach. The other thing I didn't like about the personal training is that it's different day to day because you're always in front of different people, but it's the same tasks all year, all throughout the year. Whereas this is changing seasonally, right? Like you may have monotonous tasks that you have to do repetitively for a couple days or a couple weeks, but the season changes all the tasks. So
nature has no plan.
Yeah, like we're doing garden prep and we're preparing for the animals in the spring, and then we get into a planting phase. We're doing some weeding and some mulching. We're moving animals around the property, and this time of year, we're all defoliating. Pretty soon we'll be harvesting, and then we'll be shutting down for the winter and winterizing everything. And it's just every couple weeks, it's totally different tasks. And I really like that, not the same all the time. I liked having the variety. There's some seasonal kind of stability. But I'm the kind of guy, I just like learning new things all the time. And like, the whole farm's kind of a canvas, and there's so much information out there, as you guys know. There's so many content producers. And if you want, you can find like a grade school level introduction to some of the soil science stuff, but then you can still find high school level stuff, and then you can find PhDs who are at the top of their fields, and they'll have a 2-hour lecture of their latest research, and it's free on YouTube or Spotify because they just posted it. So
Sweet.
Link.
So now that seems like you found your calling, and you're doing all these different things on the farm every day, what would be some of the challenges that you face daily?
Whoa, man. There's challenges every day, and they're often different challenges. Like, it could be something as simple as, like, we're selling meat to clients, right? And you get a new client, and they're confused about their order because it's their first time buying directly from a farm. And so sometimes it's customer-facing challenges. Sometimes it's weather challenges. Like, we had like a really wet fall in 2021. That was not as great for the harvest. Or you get a huge storm also in 2021. We had not quite a tornado, but about as close as you can get. Uprooted probably 24 plants. Wow. And so we were trying to, like, lift up plants, use trellising to get them back sturdy again. Logistics sometimes with, like, trying to book butcher dates and trying to, because, in this day and age with small scale ag, you don't have, like, butchers in every community and you can just call them up a week before. Like, I need to book my pig butchering date before my pigs are actually born. Right. So there's a lot.
Sounds like the cannabis industry. And
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. And then that's a whole other can of worms.
For
cannabis. Sure. Yeah. I completely forgot about we've got a regulatory body that oversees the legal cannabis market in Canada. And there are some occasional frustrations with that. I don't know how many of them I want to get into because I don't want to make a target out of myself. But
I think a lot of people understand.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, there's again, talking about reading in books, there's a book called The Obstacle is the Way. I'm pretty sure it's Ryan Holiday. And it's essentially, in a nutshell, it's about stoicism. And it's recognizing that throughout your life, there will always be obstacles. And rather than taking the kind of like, woe is me approach, and there's always something stopping me and giving up, is to realize that the obstacle is there so you can learn how to overcome it, right? And every obstacle you clear makes you a stronger, more resilient, more capable, more competent person. So it's very much like the Bruce Lee quote, which I'll probably butcher, but something to the effect of, do not wish for an easy life, wish for the strength to endure a difficult life.
Wow.
And so that's what farming offers you, is an opportunity to, get punched in the face and then just get back up and try again.
Yeah, man. And I guess, with asking about challenges, nature is the challenge, I guess, right?
Yeah.
There's no...
You're fighting against it in a way. You're also working with it.
Yes.
And then once you receive some sort of fruit from it, it's just so rewarding. And I bet you know that best out of anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot of fun here. There's a ton of hard work, but it's super rewarding, and you couldn't be any happier.
I'd imagine you guys have a pretty small team, very intimate.
Yeah, so through the growing season, it's me and one other guy, Davis. Check out the Sun Moon Gardener on Instagram.
Okay, will do.
So he and I run through the growing season together. And
of all crops, or is this just cannabis? Sorry.
Yeah, everything. So we've basically, typical day, we're doing animal chores in the morning for the first hour to 2. So that's basically feeding everybody. On certain days, we're moving fences. So cattle, we move every single day to a new area. Meat chickens, we're moving every single day to a new area. Pigs, we move about every 3 days, and the hens follow them. So that kind of takes up our mornings, and then it's different tasks in different seasons. So usually something related to cannabis and gardening. We have the B&B, so we're trying to keep the landscaping looking reasonably tidy. So we even do some yard work and landscaping stuff.
Yes.
I don't think we talked about
We'll
this.
plug it under this video as well so people can see it.
For sure. Did you grow before this farm?
Very limited before the farm. So I got an ACMPR before we moved out here. So I had and I bought an indoor tent and did some indoor growing.
Nice.
So I had 2 harvests before we bought this property. But yeah, we just went all in.
Okay.
And this is kind of like when legalization happened. My cousin called me, said, "Hey, we can grow weed now." I was like,
"Yeah,
what?"
Yeah.
A week later, I had a tent with plant in it in my house, and I think that one of the things we've come to recently, and I guess maybe because of our accidental breeding project, which probably happened for a reason, is trying to find something that grows outside instead of inside.
Yeah.
Finding something that can sustain itself. It has some qualities to kind of fight against the climate that we face here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the sun produces some incredible cannabis, and I more so speaking to concentrates. I think sun-grown concentrates, anytime I've ever had them, just kind of shine.
Purple Hills
I
is a
think-
clear example. Of
Yeah,
that.
I think it makes a lot of sense. And somebody put it to me this way. I thought it was a really interesting point. Is you don't really want to eat wine grapes, right? Like if you're looking for a good edible grape, right? And there's amazing growers who are growing vineyards for wine specifically, but it's for wine, right? And it's not a great edible grape. And the flower, like you're gonna get more delicate flowers indoors just because of the conditions they're grown in, where the outdoor plants are getting a lot more stresses. So you're gonna get like thicker cell walls and kind of hardier. So when you're visually judging a nug, like that's kind of on an indoor standard. And I don't think outdoors, I don't know anybody who's gonna quite match that. But what you do get outdoor with the sun grown and the living soils is really incredible terpene profiles, right? And so you're stripping away all the plant material when you're doing concentrates anyways. And so you're just letting those terps really shine when you're having your live resins or live rosins.
I guess it's intention of what you were trying to do with your product at the end of the day.
Yeah, like what is it going to go into? Like we have so many different categories now of products. And it makes sense to me that there would be differences in the growing method, could shine a little more here or there. And yeah, like you said, I think outdoor and concentrates make a whole lot of sense, especially. And this is the other thing I often say is that there are exceptional indoor growers who grow amazing indoor, and there are dog shit indoor growers who grow horrible indoor.
For sure.
And the same is true of outdoor. Oftentimes, people classify outdoor weed as if all outdoor grown weed is the same, but the love and care that we put in our plants is not necessarily the same as every guy with 4 plants in their backyard who are, like there's some pretty spectacular differences that you can make grower to grower outdoor.
For sure.
And then to your point, yeah, genetics are huge too, right? So I think it's nature and it's nurture. You need to have good genetic potential.
Right.
And there are going to be plants that are going to be a little more pest resistant or a little more disease resistant, or just a little hardier. And then, climate also makes a difference, right? Like what's the finishing time of that strain? If it's going to be a really late finisher.
It's a 12-weeker, then it's not going outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've had a couple of those.
Yeah. But that's the whole fun of being able to experiment now,
Yes.
right? Being able to grow your own weed. And you get to play around with all these things. And it's just like making your own beer, making your own wine. Your first batch is probably not going to be your best batch, and you'll probably have some massive failures in there, but then there's going to be some successes and you'll be able
You
to
learn from them.
piece things together.
For sure.
And you got to do something, right? That's like what I always say is like, you got to do something with your time.
Yes.
There's only so many episodes of The Simpsons you can watch.
Yeah.
So, it's fun to, get out there and do something.
I think one of the things for me through COVID was there was nothing to do.
Yeah.
I didn't have a job. So there's a YouTube channel called Ross Kitchen. So it's a Rastafarian man in the Blue Mountains in Jamaica. And basically that's what he eats off his farm.
Right.
And there was just something in that time that connected me to that. And I remember for the whole first summer of COVID, and you probably remember this, I was outside gardening and trying to like reseed our grass. And like, I just had this like
Nice.
complete shift. And ever since then, it's been an
How old are you?
obsession. I just turned 25.
Okay. It's a little early. I have a theory that there's like the dad instincts kind of come in. I don't know when it lands for everybody, but I feel like it was around 30-ish for me, late 20s, 30. I started kind of caring about the grass and the lawn. And I was like, yeah, it's just like how my property looks. Where, when you're...
Yeah, that's a dad thing. That's
Yeah.
for
For sure. When you have your own property too, obviously there's a sense of responsibility, I guess.
That's the huge trigger, yeah. When you get your own place, all of a sudden you're like, okay, like what are we going to do here?
Yeah, no one else is going to do it. I got to do it for
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you know Dragonfly Earth Medicine?
Not familiar, no.
I'll have to connect you with them. They're out in BC, but they're just on a podcast, but you'd be fascinated. One of the things she said on the podcast is, I forget her name, but the point of our world is decay,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
And this is something that like it, and not that maybe I already kind of thought this, but not in that direct of a way, but it's like the earth will consume everything.
Yeah.
But what we've done as humans is we've created things that the earth can't consume.
Right.
And we've started to treat our earth not the best. And that's why we're getting attacked back from the earth, is because it's like we're taking a knife and stabbing into the ground and the earth. That's basically what's happening across the world. Why wouldn't the world do that back to us?
Yeah. So like one of something that came up recently that was interested, and I don't want to get into the most controversial possible subjects, but so most people think the climate is changing. I would tend to be one of the people who agree with that statement. But it was a really interesting point, is that as you're seeing local temperatures rising over, say, since the 1920s, right, as you look at a lot of these charts of how temperatures are increasing, one of the things I talk about with mulching is that we keep our soil temperatures cool, right? So when you cover the ground in a wood chip mulch or you have a grass pasture, the soil temps stay around 70, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, in that range. And that's exactly where plant roots like the temps, and they can pull up nutrients and they can pull up moisture effectively. As the soil temperatures increase above that, getting into the 90s and above 100, the plant roots can't actually access and utilize the moisture and the nutrients. So you'll essentially get like a nutrient lockout, not because there's not water available, not because there's not nutrients available, because the soil temp is too hot, and you're going to get sad plants with limping over leaves. And you're going to get those higher temperatures when you have bare exposed soil, right? The soil temps will get, because they're getting that direct sunlight. You know what's even hotter than bare soil? Concrete and pavement in cities. And what are cities completely made out of, right? So as the sun's coming and heating a cityscape, right? Because there's no green stuff, there's no grass pastures, there's not much tree canopy. The cities themselves are what are heating up. And where are the weather stations that are measuring, right? They're all in cities. So you're seeing the temperature increases. And it's like, well, we keep building all these massive jumbo cities and we keep blaming cow farts for the problems that are, coming up. And as long as we're being controversial, I'll just lay in that the cow farts on our farm, they're part of a cyclical nutrient cycling. So we're not digging up methane gas from 500 feet under the ground and releasing into the atmosphere. The cattle is eating pasture grasses on our farm, and as they're digesting and breaking down, they're pooping out the methane, which is going up into the sky for the most part. But then that pasture is pulling in CO2 out of the atmosphere and releasing oxygen the same way a tree does, right? So it's coming back down, and then it's storing carbon into the soil and into the new plants, and then next year's cattle are eating that. So there's not net new gases being released into the atmosphere. It's part of an existing cycle. So I don't think it should be compared apples to apples to say fossil fuel use. So kind of transportation, industry,
for sure,
I think are kind of the bigger culprits there.
There's many factors for sure.
Sorry to finish the point. If we're looking at, I don't think we should be looking at blaming the animals. We should be looking at blaming the management practices, right? So how the animals are raised can make a pretty big difference. Saying feedlot versus pasture raised, and especially rotationally grazed on a pasture makes a big difference.
I'd love to plug what you're doing via farming with animals and providing like more sustainable meats, which is, I don't know anything about it, but I'd love to hear more about that because that's something that I value a lot. I was vegan for a year. I went vegan because of that YouTube channel, because Rastafarians tend to not eat meat, sometimes maybe fish. But I just attached to it, and I actually felt the best I ever felt.
Oh, really?
Being vegan, but I couldn't keep my weight. And so I started to eat meat again, and I was able to kind of fill out again. But when I went back to eating meat, it was, I want to make sure I'm eating good meat.
Sure.
I'm sourcing my meat properly. And it's still something I'm searching, and there's a lot in our area.
Came to the right place,
across here. So yes, I got a freezer to fill. So why don't we give yourself a plug here for what you guys are doing there?
Sure. Yeah. So our farming company is called Hog Wild Farming Company. We've got a website, hogwildfarmingcompany.com. So all the animals we raise on our farm, we sell the meat directly to our customers. So there's grass-fed, grass-finished beef, pasture-raised, fruit-fed pork, chicken, eggs. We also have honey, And
Who takes care of the bees?
so actually, our direct neighbor is a beekeeper. They're called 10 Hill Honey, and so we made an agreement with them. So we bought the hives, and she comes and manages the beehives because it's like what they do. We pay them a fee for their services, and then the honey's ours.
How much honey
to sell.
would you usually get?
So this year we just harvested 200 pounds, which is from 4 hives, and that's our second year. So we split the hives this year. So we started with 2, we split the 4. So we should expect quite a bit more next year. And then every time we're able, we'll just keep kind of adding more and more hives through the year.
Such an important part of being biologically diverse is to have that at your farm too. So Build a Soil, who we spoke about before, is they have a hive right in there. They don't have a greenhouse, but they have like a cover that they use. But they have a hive right in there.
Yeah, cool.
And there's bees all around all the time, and it's just fascinating to me. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Well, so for here, it's great for us because so we planted about 3 dozen fruit trees for our pigs. So it's basically an orchard that's planned with the pig migration through the year. So we basically took June-bearing cherry trees, and we planted them where the pig paddocks will be at that time of year. And then as the pigs move forward into July, they're going to get underneath some apricots and some plums. And then as they move forward, they'll be getting pears and apples,
You got
peaches.
that Asian pear.
Yeah, we had that Asian pear, the kusui.
You got to eat an Asian pear?
I watched Chris eat it.
Yeah.
I was pretty jealous.
But so the idea is as the pigs are being moved through the year, they're going to be landing under fruit trees that are dropping seasonal, local, organic fruit, right? And so the pigs are going to be eating these fruits off the ground. It's adding more diversity to their diet. And so pigs are going to store the bioflavonoids and the polyphenols, all the kind of antioxidant compounds that are in the foods they eat, get stored in their fat. And those flavor notes you can actually pick up when you eat our pork. Because they're fed, they get grass-fed Jersey cow milk throughout the year, along with a non-GMO pig ration. We actually soak the grains in the Jersey cow milk. They're eating through the pasture, so they're pulling up wild carrots. They're eating all the clovers and alfalfa. And then for about 6 to 8 weeks at the end of the season, they're getting fattened up with fresh local fruits.
And that's like, keeping the area clean too. Everything that falls on the ground.
Yeah, totally.
It just goes into, keeping everything clean and having a sustainable ecosystem.
Absolutely. And so getting back to the bees, they play a role in this because we've got all these fruit trees. We've also got berry bushes. We've got a herb garden for our family. And then all the pasture flowers. So there's a couple dozen different varieties of forbs and grasses and clovers in our fields. So the bees are able to always spread pollen and collect nectar throughout the year. And they're pollinating our fruit trees and our berry bushes and everything. So we're keeping an environment where there's always something for the bees to use. And they're making all of our different food crops better and pollinating them for us. So it's kind of a good win-win relationship. And then I know vegans, some of them are upset with the use of honey. So we use a method where we're leaving half the honey back for the bees to eat to keep them alive through the winter, where a lot of people will harvest all the honey and then feed the bees like a sugar, kind of a sugar juice through the winter. So
that was one thing I didn't actually stop using when I was eating a vegan diet, loose vegan diet, if you may.
Sure.
But honey is, I consume a lot of it. So, I only use honey and maple syrup as sweeteners.
Nice.
But I would love to inquire about some of that.
Yeah, we'll set you up, man, for sure.
Nice.
We've got raw, unpasteurized local honey from a diverse pasture farm.
And for people, and just to kind of touch more on where can this be purchased, and what's the place for people to go to?
Yeah, so we sell everything direct off the farm. So if you go to our website, again, hogwildfarmingcompany.com, you can see what we have available and you can order through the site. We're pretty local. We're just a 37-acre farm and we sell out of most things. So we're not shipping. It's pick up from the farm only, basically. So if you're in the Creemore, Collingwood, or the GTA, we're hopefully not too far. But yeah, everything is amazing. Kind of once you try it, you're kind of coming back, and we'll have to find some more farmland and raise some more.
I even remember you saying on the tour that you have a relationship with your wood. Is it a wood chip guy?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's all symbiotic relationships. So everything we do, you're trying to manage the benefits, right? So I used that example earlier of the the chickens following the pigs. It's improving the health of the animal. It's improving the health of the local environment. It's lowering a cost for us. And it's just using 2 enterprises we already have. So it's like if there's a waste stream from one enterprise, which is pig poo, it's like, oh, that can actually help feed the other enterprise, which is the
one
chicken.
man's one man's trash is another man's treasure.
100%.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
And
go.
so with the wood chips, we use the wood chips in our composting. We use them for mulch. We also backfill our pig areas. So sometimes the pigs will make these really big wallows. They've learned how to open their water tank valves and just like make little slop piles for themselves, which is good for the pigs because that's how they cool off on the hot days. But they'll often dig out like 6, 8, even 12-inch holes when they make these piles. And so we'll use wood chips to backfill those big holes so we don't have these massive holes everywhere.
Right.
So we go through a lot of wood chips. But if you're an arborist and you're, chipping wood all day from your work, you've got to drop that at a waste facility and pay to get rid of your wood chips. And so for my guy Kurt, he just comes here and I say, anytime you're doing a job in the area, just use my farm as a drop spot. You can drop them here for free. And so he thinks he's scamming me and I think I'm scamming him. And it's like a perfect relationship where it's like, if I told him how much I need and how much I value these wood chips, he might put a price tag on it. But at the same time, he's like, hey, you're saving me money. And it's not like,
Maybe Kurt will see this.
He's nearby anyways. So it's kind of like, cool, I'll just come up here and drop this load.
Nice.
And and it works for everybody. So that's the other thing is developing community, right? Relationships with your neighbors, knowing who does what, and just helping out when you can because, there's always, you always run into a situation. Like a friend of mine said that they're like, a guy for everything, don't you? And it's like, yeah, you kind of want to, right?
It is about who you know at the end of the day. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so we're in a good spot, raising food. It's easy for us to give someone a jar of honey here or a pork chop there or whatever. So yeah.
It'd be amazing if that's how it was across the board though.
Yeah, everybody
was
just
giving.
gives what they, kind of produce and everyone's happy with, what they're getting and everyone's like sharing and it's just
That's one of the reasons I loved when I started growing is I always had more weed than I could ever smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So like giving a friend, gifting them a half ounce of weed might save them $150 for that.
It's even the gesture though,
month and
like
a
they'll
half, 2
remember
months.
that,
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it feels good to do that because it's nothing to me to give that to you, but then it's just giving.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels good to give, I think. Yeah, it's harder and harder these days for people. I think, it's tough times getting tougher out there for everybody, but that's always the most important thing is just, the relationships in your own life and, taking care of the people you care about.
So I want to touch back on to mulch because I want to talk more about how you guys feed your plants.
Sure.
And you guys do fermented plant juice as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear more because the way that we cultivate organically is through top dressing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that I'm losing a connection with. I don't want to top dress with just dry amendments and order them from this place and that. Creating the food that you're feeding is something that I've been wanting to do.
Cool.
And I know that that's kind of one of your guys' practices. So speak a little bit on that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So we got into the Korean natural farming world via Chris Trump. So if anybody's looking for more details on this, he's got a ton of YouTube videos, free resources. But essentially, the information comes from Master Cho, who's a farmer in Korea. Very subsistence farming, so it's all trying to use resources you have available to make fertility. So the fermented plant juice is one input you can make yourself. Essentially, what you're doing, you can also check out. We've got a few examples on our Instagram. So @hogwild farming. If you guys are visual and you want to see this, essentially what you're doing is going out into a field, ideally early in the morning when there's still some dew on plants, and you're going to snip just the tips of the most vigorous growing weeds at that time of year, ideally when they're in their vegetative stage. Well, definitely not just ideally. You want to do it when they're in their vegetative stage. So most plants are going to go from, vegetative, they'll get bigger, they'll put on a flower, and then they'll go to seed. So don't, we're doing this with the leafy material of a plant when it's still in its vegetative cycle. So you're picking all the stems. In our case, we'll fill up a few 5-gallon buckets when we go out. You're going to come home with all your plant material. It's going to get mixed with equal parts sugar And so then you're going to mix it in thoroughly. And through osmotic pressure from the sugar, all the moisture is going to be drawn out of the plant material. And there will be a reaction that occurs. And essentially, you're going to let this sit for about a week, give or take, depending on the temperature. And then you're going to strain off all the plant material. And you're going to get this rich syrup that comes out. That syrup is going to be rich in plant phytochemicals and phytonutrients and enzymes. So there are certain like growth hormones that are going to be in the meristem of the plant. So if we're thinking about how a plant grows, right, all the new growth is coming out of the very tips. And that's where the highest concentration of plant phytochemicals are going to be, is right on that tip.
Interesting.
So that's why we're snipping the tips and just focusing on the tips. And then once you've got your syrup separated from the plant material, you're going to dilute your syrup down in water, and it can be applied as a foliar or as a soil drench. But usually it's even better in combination. So there's certain kind of recipes where you'll use multiple of these different inputs. So there's kind of a prebiotic and pest preventative concoction called Oriental Herbal Nutrient. It's basically fermented garlic, ginger, licorice, angelica, and cinnamon, and then tinctured. And that can go in as an ingredient. We make a fish amino acid, so it's a similar process, breaking down fish over a period of about 6 months to a year.
You guys make that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a couple jars in the fridge right now. If you guys want to take a look.
Use simple syrup? Is that the sugar that you use?
So we're using organic cane sugar.
Okay.
And you're mixing. So you basically, I've got a friend. I know a guy who's a fisherman. These guy's fanatical about fishing. And I just said, hey, can you just, and he eats pretty much all of it. So I said, can you just save all the remains for me, all the fish guts and whatnot? And so he gave me a couple coolers full, and we mix it with equal parts sugar. And you're putting a sugar cap on top of it to prevent any like microbial infiltration. And we'll also add some of our indigenous microbe inoculant into it. So there's some good biology in there. And then you're literally just letting this sit for a minimum of 6 months, and then straining out the fish solids. And just like the FPJ or the fermented plant juice, you're getting this oozy, rich syrup. Tastes a lot like hoisin sauce if you're brave enough to put a little on your tongue.
Jeremy always talks about that from Build a Soil. He goes, I'll taste it. He's like, you don't have to, but I like to taste mine. Super funny.
But yeah, it's just this really sweet fish sauce. It's going to be super high. So it breaks down the amino acids from the fish into like their individual forms. And so it's a plant available, high nitrogen amino acid feed. So you can dilute that in water as well with your FPJ, using rice vinegar to change acidity, and put in some like apple cider vinegar or a naturally fermented rice vinegar.
pHing your FPJ is a fairly important part of it?
No, not at all. No.
Okay.
So if you have good microbial biology, microbes will buffer pH right up to the rhizosphere of the plant. So like the root zone of the plant could have a different pH than a few inches away based on the microbes. So it kind of every control measure that's kind of done in an indoor environment, it's kind of like microbes are going to take care of that, bro.
So when you're saying, rice vinegar and you're saying using that as acid, I'm thinking pH. So maybe I'm not connecting it the right.
It's you can think probably like more of the benefit is going to come from the yeast and the microbes in the apple cider vinegar or the rice wine vinegar. But it is going to change, like it is acidic, so it is going to take the pH down. But you're basically, in most cases, you're going to just follow a recipe depending on kind of time of year and goal, right? So is this vegetative stage? So I kind of wanted a little nitrogen bump. So they've got certain inputs that they call kind of just maintenance inputs, and then certain will be dictated towards like whether you're in veg, flower, or reproduction, because these techniques are applied not just to cannabis, but whatever you want. Vegetable gardens, fruit trees, nut trees.
And you guys utilize it for everything?
Yeah, we utilize it for a ton of stuff here on our farm.
Nice.
So yeah, what else? Like LAB is another big one. So a lactobacillus that you can make yourself at home.
I really wanted to try, and I know it's pretty simple.
Super
easy.
Is that
with the rice that you make?
Yes.
Yeah, so you make a rice wash. So if you're cooking rice for dinner, just wash your rice in water first and keep that water. Give it about a day with a like an airlock or just even a paper towel on top of a thing to keep stuff out of it. It's going to get like a sweet rice smell after about 24 hours or so. And then you can use that as a starter to add to milk, and then let your milk sit out for a couple days, and it's going to turn to cheese. It's so you're going to have your curds and whey. So you'll have a cheese curd, and then there's going to be whey left in this liquid. You're going to try to strain out as much of the milk solids as you can, and that leftover liquid is going to be really rich in native lactobacillus. So it's in the air, it's all around us. Different environments and climates are going to have different strains of lactobacillus. So whatever's local in your own climate and your own area usually makes a lot of sense. It's kind of one of the founding principles of this natural farming method is you want to work with the native biology as much as you can, rather than, because if you import something from Hawaii or Japan or South America, who knows if that's going to be able to make it here.
It's even like taking a clone, right? Like if you're taking a clone from somebody else's grow. We did this. I took a clone from a guy that grew salts, salt-based, and it did horrible in our soil. Maybe if we ran it 2 or 3 times and it was able to adapt to the feeding of a living soil, maybe it would have been different.
Yeah, it might have been a big shock.
It
like
was.
Heat shock and everything.
Yeah, it was. The plant, it was like the second week of flower, which would be probably peak stretch, is when I finally was like, maybe it's okay, but it's also stretching. So I was like, it's probably the happiest it's going to be anyway right now. So it was, I feel like it's a very similar thing.
But yeah, the whole bunch of stuff. I think it's probably too much to go through all of them here. But
for sure.
There's kind of courses on it. There's a lot of free stuff online about it. But again, it comes back to this idea of using waste streams or very cheap ingredients that are local to you to be able to enhance fertility on your own farm.
And reducing the footprint while doing it.
Yeah.
Reducing your cost, it has to as well.
Exactly.
Right?
So it always comes down to those things. It's like, we're looking for solutions that improve the health of the product or the quality of the product, lower our costs, and have a positive environmental impact, right? And so, taking a waste stream and recycling it into an input, that's a huge environmental benefit right there. Because, like you said, if I'm buying salts or I'm buying any commercially available products, that's got to be manufactured somewhere, which means those resources had to be mined or collected. Then they had to be packaged up. Then it had to be distributed across the country or even across continents to get somewhere. And it's all packaged up. So there's just a much more of a footprint associated with it. Whereas if you can do it yourself, you're reducing that footprint and lowering your costs. And then if you're able to make a better quality product, so I'm willing to bet my fish amino acid that I made from my friend's fish guts is probably a better product than fish hydrosilate or a fish emulsion that I could buy off a shelf.
I bet. I've actually haven't had good experiences with hydrolysate.
Oh no?
No, we have it, and I the squid juice that we have.
Yeah, the squid juice. I actually use it in like even my regular plants, and it is super, super nice. Like it's a recycled juice from calamari production.
Oh, nice.
So a bunch of nitrogen, phosphorus. It's just like I think it's 444, or actually I don't know what it is. Maybe 422, something like that.
Either way,
hella nitrogen. But yeah, it's just another sustainable source of this is going to go to waste, but how can we benefit from it? And I think the waste company probably, like the people producing the calamari, benefit from it because they don't have to go shove it somewhere where they have to throw it away. And then like these squid juice guys are like, okay, this is a business for us,
right? Right, and shout out to them. They sent us a bottle of that to try.
Shout out to Sammy.
Worked out really well,
Nice.
Worked out really well. But I'd love to see it after. I know it's probably got a good scent to it as well.
Oh yeah, it's funky.
Yeah.
Cool. It's probably like that hoisin sauce you're talking about.
Yeah.
So one of the things that maybe you'll be able to speak to this. I know you mentioned using leafy material, vegetative material for
the fermented plant juice.
Right.
Yeah.
I've heard of people using flowers and the flowering part of the plant for feeding
flower.
in flower. Is that something that you believe in as well?
Yeah. So like it's I guess a philosophy that's out there because there are people who can like go into the nitty gritty technical details of exactly what you're pulling out of that plant in that state. But the higher level principle is kind of, you're going to get the stuff you need for flower from flowers, and you're going to get the stuff you need from veg from veg. But yeah, like they definitely use banana leaf. And then there's fermented fruit juices as well.
Right.
So people will take the fruits of plants, and that'll usually be to enhance ripening of a fruit. So yeah, it's totally a thing that's done. It's totally a thing you can do. 100%. Yeah.
Right. I think it just makes sense, I guess. And I've heard of I don't know who it is, but there's a guy that I know via Instagram that's going to do an experimentation with utilizing his cannabis flower harvest. to make
Right.
the extract to then feed his plants the next year from the flowered plants from the year before.
Yeah, so I've made a ton of FPJs from fan leaves and used it,
Right.
and it's worked fine. Worked really well.
Yeah, and that was one of the things with our fan leaves. It's mulch. Every fan leaf we've ever
you
had,
chop and
we
drop.
drop it into the
100%,
mulch. And the stalks is one of the things we started to do as well, which was cool to leave the
Just
stalk in
there, let
plant
it
next to
decompose.
it.
Yeah.
A month later, you just go like this, and the stalk just pulls right out, and you're like,
So we do, same thing. We'll leave the stalk in for a year, but we chop at the bottom, and then
Yes.
we're shredding our stems.
I was going to ask about that because that's something I think that is, there's so much stalk and stem everywhere that could be utilized. And there's a living soil company. They do indoor out of Florida called No Till Kings. And that's what their mulch layer is, their stalk. And that's what they utilize.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating to me because the way that I think about it, I guess, is like if cannabis was growing in nature, if we have a natural acre of cannabis growing here, it's all going to decompose every year and kind of like feed itself.
Yeah.
So should the plant just be able to sustain its own feed, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of interesting thought on this coming out of the regenerative agricultural world, not just with cannabis, but in general. The conventional model is you need to refeed because you're extracting, like you put in 60 pounds of nitrogen, you pulled out 60 pounds of nitrogen, you need to put it back in again. But our atmosphere is 76% nitrogen, right? And there's certain plants like legumes, like locusts, they're nitrogen fixers. So they're actually pulling atmospheric nitrogen into the plant, and they've got root nodules where they store it. And then there are bacteria, rhizotrophic bacteria that will release the nitrogen from that root, and then they'll either get consumed by another microbe or they'll go off somewhere and die. And essentially the nitrogen from the atmosphere is getting put back into the soil. But it's, again, a relationship between the biology. You have to have the microbes there to release the nitrogen. And then as far as minerals go, as long as there's rocks in your soil, you've got minerals, right? Like who doesn't have rocks in their soil, right? So as long as you have bacteria that are breaking down the mineral on the rock slowly, and they're getting consumed by someone else in the soil, the nutrients are going to be available for your plants. The idea is to keep layering new organic matter on the top. The microbes will be going up and down through the soil, bringing the upper layer of freshly decomposed stuff. It's actually a class in what we call the soil food web.
Right.
There's a group that are called the shredders.
Yes.
Right. So those are the microarthropods. They're kind of going up and down, shredding up leaf material, shredding
like
up straw.
Worms
are gonna, and they're gonna be bringing materials up and down, and then other guys are gonna be digesting. But it's essentially the basic premise is you've got these small bacteria and fungi which are decomposers. They're gonna get eaten and consumed by larger order things that are gonna end up pooping them out and releasing the decaying material that they were eating, and converting it into a plant available form of nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or whatever the nutrient happens to be.
Right.
And so the microbes are taking care of it for you, right? As long as there's new things dying, like you said, landing on the surface of the ground, they'll eventually get decomposed and put back in. And when you combine that with harnessing atmospheric nitrogen and things like this, nobody's feeding forests, right? It's kind of the thing we keep coming back to.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
Man.
Like until the 1940s, this was not done anywhere on the planet ever, right? So it's always good to keep in mind how long of a time scale we think in, which is usually like weeks to months to years, right? And then think of like even just a human, like all of humanity, and where did this thing that's totally normal that we've never even thought about today, when did we start doing it? It's like, oh, the 60s. Oh, what did we do before that? And then, is it better, or did, maybe if we went back and looked at the foundation again, we'd realize this was a big error, or at least we made a big trade-off to get this that nobody's really talking about, right? So we are producing more food than we'd ever produced before, but we're producing food with much lower mineral content and much lower, like you have to eat more calories of food.
Yeah, that's why everyone's hungry all the time.
Totally. You have to eat more food to get the same level of nutrition.
It's not even about hungry. It's about being nutrition deficient.
Yeah,
right. It's about not being able to have everything that you need. And yeah, like you're saying, I think if we go back and try to reiterate and try to replan like how to do it, I think back then it was just about quantity, like you're saying, instead of quality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there ends up being it's a pattern I notice across different industries, but in the case of ag, somebody's making a product, right? The product works, it does what it says, right? And then you get a big sales push behind it, right? And then if you're a big ag company and you're producing a product, you might fund some research. And if you've got a researcher who understands how the game works, they're going to ask a research question that's going to produce a result that's going to be favorable to your company so they can get funding. Because if they start asking a bunch of questions that are contrary to what the people funding the research want, they're not going to get funded, right? And then their college administration or the university administration is going to be coming down on them because they're not getting any grants and their career is going to go down. And the guy who asked the question, who made the product look good, he's going to get funded and he's going to get more funding, and his PhD students. So there becomes this major push, right? There's a lot of financial incentives to sell stuff, right? And this model, nobody's really making any money off of my farm other than me. And even that is not like, it's kind of hard to say it's making money, but you guys get my point is, in business, the truth tends to be what makes the most profit, right? Where in the real world, we're kind of searching for truth and we're searching for answers, and you bump up against that, that big machine, right? There's a lot of really high quality research. There's also a lot of research that when you look into it, it's really it's so paper thin. It's not as robust as you think. There's a lot of statistical tricks that are done constantly. And the most important thing was what I kind of said. It really matters what questions you're asking that you decide to research, and what questions you could have asked that nobody's looking at all. Mm-hmm. And then we do some studies, and we really, good scientists don't do this. Good scientists always say more research needs to be done, and media kind of takes that message and says, oh, science discovers that, eating eggs is bad for you. It's like, and then 2 weeks later, it's, a different
maybe the
study.
$4 carton from the grocery store, though.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I said maybe the $4 carton from the grocery store.
Yeah.
Maybe those are the eggs we shouldn't
maybe that's
be
the one
eating.
you shouldn't be eating. Yeah.
I think
maybe
if
Chris's eggs are okay.
If we had a nice omelet here, I don't think I'd be too worried about what I was eating. So
yeah.
Have you ever read? I'm going back to books. One Straw Revolution.
Yeah. Well, I listened to that one, if I'm being 100% honest.
It was hard for me to read it. It took me like 2 or 3 times fully, and I'm not a great reader. It takes me time to get my books done because I'm always thinking about other things. But I feel like that was I think that might have been the first book I read that opened my eyes to how, with what you're saying, is this didn't happen that long ago.
Yeah.
This is 80 years ago.
Yeah, totally.
So that book kind of showed me he knew then. What's his name? Masanobu Fukuoka, I think is what it is.
Damn.
Yes, I think that's what it is. I could have messed it up, but that was his. The book basically was about talking about how he was trying to prove to people that doing things in the most natural way, the regenerative way, and just let time kind of do its course, while everybody else was like, well, look at our numbers here. Mm-hmm. But then he was blowing everybody else's numbers out of proportion because it became about numbers. Yeah. Like you were kind of saying there as well, numbers. Right? Yeah. And when business is involved, it's usually about numbers. So I think it's inevitable for that to happen. But I feel like that book encapsulates it really well to explain, what's the reason? Why did it change? Yeah. Why did we move into this? And it wasn't a slow thing. It was just this is what we do now. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the short answer to that is that when there's big business interest behind something, there's a big push. So it infiltrates the universities through the research. And now that's being taught to all the kids who are going to ag school. And they're leaving thinking this is the way to do it. And to be clear, it's quite a bit more convenient, right? You almost kind of get a manual, right? Here are all the machines you need to do this. Right. Here's how you seed it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's, I think there's a lot of parallels in healthcare. There's a lot of parallels just in the nutrition world and the food world, not the growing side, but the, grocery side. You just see it over and over and over again. At least I do. And I'm just trying to tie it to what you were saying. I'm drawing a blank on what my point was, guys.
That's okay.
But
it might come to you.
It might come to me. It might not.
We're in the cannabis industry,
Yeah,
right?
man.
Yeah.
We have
happens to the best of us.
Yeah, a lot more than I'd like, but
Happens to us a couple times every video we film. So
I'm
Right.
blaming it on
Oh.
my dad.
What I wanted to say is that the hard part about this in the end is that when you do stumble onto just a little bit of truth, it takes an unbelievable amount of faith because everyone around you in your industry is telling you you're an idiot, basically, right? When you stumble onto something that's like, this makes sense to me, but it's totally contrary. And it's not even just like, it's a little different. It's like 180 degrees
Yes,
different,
right.
It's like, we're not going to use any of these products. We're not going to plow this up at all.
Yeah.
We're not
we're not going to tell. We're
Yeah.
not going to
Throw the textbook
Yeah.
away, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm sure, there's just a ton of people like around me in the community who are just like, what those guys are doing, it's nuts. And then, so it really becomes a challenge when you face your first problems, right? Because, really starting like I started in kindergarten at this, right? I didn't start in an agriculture family. I didn't start in a growing family. Nobody was teaching me how to do this. It was all self-directed from research I'm doing online, from books I'm buying, from visiting other people's farms who are trying to do this as well, which are few and far between,
Yes.
right? And then, so yeah, when you run into some snags, you're kind of just on your own. So it's kind of getting back to that, the obstacle is the way kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you really have to get into a mindset of, oh, it's hard? Good. Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Exactly.
Like, what
It's
are we going to
supposed to
learn
be.
from this?
Yeah. It's supposed to be hard.
It's supposed to be hard.
Right.
And then it becomes that much more rewarding when you do start getting some successes. And then, like you were saying about the One Straw Revolution, you start, like, this is our 5th season on this farm, and it's less work every single year. Like,
Love that.
it's so cool.
It's so fascinating that that's how it works.
Yeah.
But that's also, I feel like one of the parts that maybe makes me, I don't want to say angry, but maybe it is anger towards the world and the industries that we have is it's obvious.
Yeah.
The proof is in the pudding. Like it's right there, but there's money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'll mess this one up as well, but it's that idea of it's really difficult to convince a man of a concept when his income depends on his not understanding that concept. And
Wow.
it's a cute little expression, but it's really true. Like, most people, when their livelihood depends on something, like they're not going to give it up easy.
Right.
And when there's a whole industry that's got a specific model, like it's not just going to be like, oh, you know what? This regenerative thing does seem better. We'll just kind of pack up our business and we'll fold it. Like like I said, there's a huge machine. And it's not just agriculture. It's that's the way most things work. And it does take, I think, a lot of courage and a lot of faith to be able to pull yourself away from those systems. And you might still be wrong, right? In my case, I've kind of been at this long enough now that I'm pretty confident that, I'm not wrong, or at the very least, what we're doing is working.
Yes.
And we want to keep doing it.
Mhm.
But honestly, it's better.
I think this is a super deep question, but I think that one of the things that I think about, and I feel like when I talk to my friends about it, is how can you practice these things? And I feel like we've talked about quite a few books. We've talked about Feed the Ground, Kiss the Ground, sorry.
Yeah, the documentary.
And then the other one that we mentioned, which was
Kiss the Ground and Biggest Little Farm.
Biggest Little Farm, which that's one of my favorite things I've ever watched.
Yeah.
Biggest Little Farm. But I feel like if you own property, if you don't own property, taking care of the land that you're near is a really good place to start.
Yeah.
What are some things you could do? What can the average person do? Whether that's nutrition and that's food, whether that's gardening or composting. What are some simple things?
Well, yeah, so you nailed a couple of them right there. I would say like composting is a really easy thing to do. You can do bokashi composting, which is just like under your counter. Bokashi is just like essentially just a little microbial inoculant you can throw in with your food in a compost bin, and it'll start breaking it down rapidly.
Utilize it in with our mulch layer when we'll do like a chop
nice.
down the cover crop. We'll throw some bokashi on there.
Yeah, beauty. So bokashi is one way. You could have a little worm bin. There's lots of free videos online showing you how to set up a worm bin if you're in a condo or an apartment. And you can have worms break down your food for you so you're not throwing stuff away for municipal services to take care of. If you've got a space for a garden is a great thing you can do. If you're into growing your own food, wonderful. If you want to grow your own weed, awesome. If you just want to have a pretty flower garden, all good too. Plant some stuff for the pollinators. And then you can start applying all of these approaches. So just if you're starting from scratch, just getting some good quality compost, trying to loosen up the soil that you're putting it on a little bit. So we use a broad fork when we're using new ground. It's just basically a really heavy duty pitchfork that you step into the ground and then just rock back and forth. So you're aerating and loosening a little bit without inverting the soil layers.
Right.
And so it's disruptive, but it's kind of minimal disruption to the microbial environment in your soil. Whereas when you run a big tiller or a heavy plow and you're actually turning soil over,
Right.
you'll break up all those fungal networks. So yeah, loosen up your soil, get some good quality compost on top of it, get some mulch on top of your compost to protect your compost, and then you can start planting and going from there. That's like easiest starting spot to get good results with minimal effort.
And watching your soil grow and change color and is the most fascinating. Like I did 2, and I don't live with my parents now, but there's along our deck, I made 2 gardens.
Right.
I actually made another garden in the corner that they've put a tree in now, which upset me a little bit. But it's a tree there now, so it's fine. But I had a nice veggie garden there that they've taken over.
Right.
But I've been able to watch. I made the one, the first year, that COVID year that I mentioned. And then I did the other one after, but the other one I did a lot more with. I put a lot more in it. I did actually like cover crops, and I was just experimenting. That soil got so dark, so black. And in Orangeville, we have heavy clay.
Right.
And you know this too. It's our backyard. It's like you can barely dig a hole.
Yeah.
But to see like how deep that got so quickly was it's such a fascinating thing.
Yeah, same thing here. So you remember my demonstration on the tour where I was trying to break up the clay. Yeah. So right in front of our composting area, there's like just some exposed clay dirt, and I'll use a pitchfork and just try to hammer away at it, and I might get like a centimeter deep because it's all crusty, hard, compacted. And then we go over to the cannabis gardens, which has the soil we've been working on for the last few years, and I can just go in up to my knuckles with finger pressure. And it's the same where we planted fruit trees and mulched them. Like
Right.
you, in such a small amount of time, you go from and you know you can see the other soil right next to it, kind of thing. And you've got a good patch of mulch soil that had some compost on it, and all of a sudden it's loose, it's earthy, the topsoil is getting deeper, and the shitty soil right next to it is still shitty soil right next to it.
Right.
Am I allowed to smoke on this podcast?
Absolutely.
Of course.
You can. Absolutely. What are you smoking on? I see that.
Oh, so shameless plug. This is the community Purple Label live resin vape cart. So it's 510 cart. It's a little over 70% THC, about 8.5% CBD, and
Nice.
13% terps.
Wow.
All of the flower came from this farm, so this was our 2022 season harvest.
It's a rotating strain, right?
Yeah, in it right now is ours, and it's garlic hot bubblegum and breadsticks.
Wow.
Really came out nice, and a lot of interesting stuff with the minor cannabinoids as well. Again, I think credited to the living soil.
Yep.
But yeah, I've been using it for the harvest. I feel like sometimes I use weed like a lot of the ways like people might use food or even alcohol, where it's like no matter, it's like if I'm exhausted and overtired, I can use it as a coping mechanism, right? If we're celebrating, it's like, yeah, let's get a little high. If we're having a nice meal and we want to enjoy it a little more, right? If we're gonna have a romantic night with the missus, it's like, yeah. So it kind of like, yeah, it's for all occasions. But as we get into this time of year, like I'm just like 24/7 all day long. We've got so much going on, getting ready for harvest, bringing animals to the butcher, doing deliveries, sales. People invite you to do podcasts. There's just always something.
Right.
And so it helps with the sleep deprivation.
Yeah. Oh my
lot.
gosh. It's the number one reason I started to use cannabis was for that exact reason.
How does that make you feel?
What's that?
What kind of effects on there?
Oh, so I'm hitting this like just a hit or two because I'm working all day, so I'm not trying to get
Yeah.
Microdosing.
100%.
and it just keeps me feeling nice, especially on the, like I was saying, on the exhaustion end. All of a sudden I'm just pleasant and happy. I'm just like, this is good. Like
Nice, man.
we're good. So and it's really round and smooth. I think the CBD really kind of takes the rougher edges off.
100%. I think
So-
I love that there's 8% CBD.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's I
It's like
love
a 2-to-1 almost.
Well,
Yeah.
you said it's 7.
No, 70%
70%.
THC.
Yeah, so
because
it's
concentrate, right?
But the CBD does, the presence of CBD and other minor cannabinoids makes such a massive difference. Maybe not to the average consumer, but to the the crazy consumer that we are, it's
Yeah,
minor
sure.
cannabinoids is something I'm so excited for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and then of course the terp. So it's live resin, so you can actually taste what
It's
the plant
that's what I was
tasted
going to
like.
ask as well. It's a 100% live resin cartridge.
And that's why they're going with the purple label as like the flagship. This is
yes.
the high end product, and it's really nice. We're really proud of it. Check it out, try it out if you're into 510 carts.
Absolutely.
100%. We've done we've done the Orangeade live resin review, and we actually did the lemon pepper as well.
Nice.
Yeah, so both
Which
are
is
just phenomenal.
A special girl, that one, that lemon pepper.
Yeah.
What was
17.9% terps.
Yeah, and I think it's hit higher than that too.
Might have been higher. Yeah, it was like
So
67%.
How did that one come about for you guys? I'm interested.
So that we didn't grow that here. You'd have to ask the guys at Purple Hills for the
Okay.
details. I don't have the inside scoop, but yeah,
No, I seen it growing the other day when we came here.
nice.
Yeah, and apparently they say that Orangeade is like a dumper. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like the best one that they've had for resin in terms of quantity.
Yeah.
That batter is really nice as well.
Yeah.
I really
like it a
enjoyed the
lot.
Orangeade a lot.
And so maybe it makes sense just to say like the relationship, which this is the really cool thing about Purple Hills, is we're 100% independent. We're our own business, and we've got our micro cultivation licenses. And so by the regulations, we're obligated to sell wholesale to a standard LP. And since our first year growing, we formed our relationship with Purple Hills, and they already had a roadmap. They're like, we want to be buying unique products from independent growers, doing things like you're doing, like Living Soil, and have like a side brand, which is now Community, which is essentially purchasing product from smaller independent grows and getting them to the OCS. Because like we just literally won't, like legally we're not capable of it, but even beyond legally, it would be really, really challenging for us to get a product like say into a live resin or into a live
Absolutely.
rosin,
Is
package
community
it up, distribute it, sell it to all the stores.
This is kind of like Creemore based, like around this area. Is that what they're going for?
Yeah, well, the Community brand is reaching out across the province, and I think maybe even beyond now, with the idea that it's small independents who are doing something unique and interesting. Purple Hills is like the local region, like these are the Purple Hills.
Yep.
Yes.
And so all the products in the Purple Hills are coming like super local, and Community reaches out a bit more.
Interesting. It's a way
yeah.
to distinguish the brands a little bit.
Yeah. And
Nice.
so you'll see on all the Community stuff, it'll say Community Care of Purple Hills.
Because you guys have the 7-gram bags through Community. Is there? Am I?
Yeah, for flour?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's, they had a lemon pepper flour. So there was the Community Chest and Community Chance. And again, those SKUs will rotate as well. So basically everything in Community is generally small batch. So as long as that SKU lasts, when it comes back in, it's usually going to be filled with flour from the same grower, different batch, or
Different
even
batch.
might be a different grow.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good to put on the small grower.
For sure.
Yeah.
and our industry is growing like that a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that's where it's going to end up. It's just going to be a whole bunch of micro growers doing it, and a
There's
lot
so
of
many
the-
licenses that come about all the time. Like, I don't know if you guys are on LinkedIn, but there's that one guy that posts all the new licenses all the time. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just like, oh my God. But it's good to see as well, because I know that a lot of these micros, there's a few people that have come about recently that we've been pretty impressed by, that are super small batch and super hands-on, which I think is important as well. So yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
It just ties in with the culture, man. I think a lot of people say about that big corporate is not where it's at, for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, I think it's like anything. Like, there a reason big corporate is going to be successful. Like, if you look at say food industry or something, or any industry, I think most people, the majority of people, want something that's more convenient at a lower price. And there's really only a small niche of people who are willing to be a little inconvenienced or pay a little more for the highest quality.
Right.
And so that, McDonald's gives you a cheap burger really quickly at a low price. But, if you want a good meal, you're not going to go to McDonald's, and, obviously you're going to pay a little more and you're going to sit down. It's going to take a little longer to get to you. And I think it'll be the same in cannabis. I think we'll always have big corporate, because it's probably going to be cheaper. They're probably going to grease some wheels a little bit, and,
Always have a market.
yeah, and then there's going to be some room for guys like me, hopefully, and smaller producers who are really committed to the quality of the product. But
There
Maybe
has
I'm-
to be a balance.
Yeah.
There has to be. Everybody needs each other, like Pepsi needs Coke.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but I know that a lot of people like to say that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's the way I feel like we've, and I've been able to see our cannabis industry grow a bit. Is that there's pieces of the pie.
Yeah.
Finding out what your piece is, I think, is the most. And for retailers, it's my biggest thing, because that's what I do. Is I go talk to retailers and I say, well, what's your piece of the pie in your town?
Right.
What are you capitalizing on?
Yeah.
Right.
How
Because
are
you don't
gonna
need to do
stand
what they're
out?
doing 700 meters away.
Yeah. How are you standing out?
Right.
Exactly.
But if you're going to do what they're doing, then you have to do it 10 times better than them.
Yeah.
Or just create your own vibe and create your own market. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can say we pay very little attention to what other people are doing because we're so busy here just doing
sure.
doing our thing, doing what we're doing.
and then, but all your energy is going into your crop,
Yeah.
and that's going to show no matter what, right? So, what's any things coming out for Purple Hills community? Anything over the next little bit? I know we have a drop coming in October.
Yeah, man. So I probably should know that, but you're asking the grower. We need to get you on with the Purple Hills team. So new drops coming out right now. I've got my head down in my plants. So
Yes, of course.
What's happening with those though? Who's going to be dealing with that?
with our crop coming down. Okay, so everything we do, we cut the plant down within 30 minutes. It's bagged and in a freezer.
Love it.
The nice thing about doing fresh frozen and doing concentrates is that the cannabis is going to hold its quality pretty much indefinitely as long as it stays frozen at temp. And so you can pull a bag out in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months. It's going to be the same level quality. And because of the process with the OCS, right, these guys, we're gonna harvest and it's going to go right into a freezer. And then we're going to test, and then they're going to go to the OCS and say, we want to make this product. And the OCS is going to say, okay, cool. Or, oh, you know what? There's kind of 2 other products kind of like that. Come back at us with something else. That takes a few more weeks. And they're like, okay, we're going to put in a 510 cart. And they're like, okay, cool. Let's do a high CBD 510 live resin. Then they can go and manufacture it. Then it can get shipped out. Stores can start ordering it.
Mm-hmm.
And then a customer can buy it. So if you're talking about dry flower, even if you're like everything is perfect and you nail it all, it's going to take a long time before that flower actually gets into the hands of customers. So having the ability to keep it up until the point where it's like, yes, this is the product we're making. It's staying frozen. It's staying at perfect quality. That's one of the other real perks in this environment that we're in
Yes.
with the legal cannabis and
Right.
and federal regulation and everything. It takes a long time to get to the end user. What was your question?
So what's when it's frozen?
Yeah.
So who's going to be like doing the extraction?
Okay, yeah. So then it's going to go down to Purple Hills
Okay.
and at the
Agri-farm?
facilities Agri-Farm.
Nice.
So we're gonna test it first to see how it turns out, what the profiles are, and then it's the next question is, okay, so what products is this going to do well in, and then what product is there room for, because they're going to have to submit to the OCS
Right.
for approval to make the product, and so
Right.
This is garlic right now, right?
This is garlic cot cake. So it's garlic cot. So the same kind of garlic cot. We grew garlic cot bubblegum the year before, and garlic cot is garlic mince and purple apricot.
Where have you found these genetics?
We got a guy.
You got a guy. I can see that.
So yeah, it's the garlic cot, and then that's crossed with a wedding cake. And so we did the garlic cot
Nice.
last year. We did a wedding cake in 2020. And so it should kind of give just a little more sweetness. And then the wedding cake profile, we were hoping was going to give a bit more bush to the garlic,
For sure.
garlic cot.
Nice. And do you get a lot of that raw garlic?
It's way fruitier than I would have thought from the name. Like you get and then with the wedding cake, there's a sweet nose, but then there is still that kind of earthy garlic thing going on. We can go smell them after
I'd
after
love
we wrap.
to. Holy.
Yeah,
I just got very excited. I got a little jittery after that.
nice.
Cannabis plants is like, I could do it all day.
Yeah.
I could do it all day. I could smell, like before you came, I was outside and testing the one outside and trying to see if it's got more notes than yours, but I think you got the better pheno. So
I mean, bro, both of them are ours, so both going in the same lung.
I think that's one of the things is when you start to, and pheno hunting's hard at small scale, obviously,
Yeah.
because to see plant expression. Obviously, if we're doing 100 plants, we're going to see so much more diversity.
The turnover is way more, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But even, and I always say it to everybody, is a lot of people will say don't phenohunt if you're only going to do 4 plants. I'm like, who are you to say that to anybody? Right?
Yeah.
You can find a winner whenever.
Might be a winner, yeah.
But just going through that process and seeing the differences in cannabis genetics is such a fun process. I encourage everybody to do it. It doesn't have to be different strains.
Yeah.
Because if you drop 4 seeds of the same strain, they're all going to be different.
It'll be a little bit different.
100%.
Right? And they might be similar. but they're going to be different at the end of the day.
I always like the analogy I guess it's just like children, right? You've got a mother genetic, a father genetic. You can have 3 kids in the same family raised in the same house.
Right.
Right? One's a doctor, one's a star athlete, the other one's in jail.
There you go. Oh my gosh, the other one's in jail.
Yeah.
It's too funny. It's actually such a beautiful day today,
Beautiful
too.
day. Yeah.
We got no clouds in the sky really as well. We had a good week this week, actually. We had
Beautiful weather for the fall. Really good for
the
finishing out
plants.
the cannabis.
holy, is it ever?
Yeah, it's always nice when there's no rain in the forecast when you're getting ready to harvest. There's no frost in the forecast.
For
That
sure.
kind of stuff gets me nervous.
I've got frost like twice in Markdale.
Mhm.
Very light, like very, very light.
Yeah, I find they're cool if it's like if they get a frost and the temps bounce back a bit the next day and they can dry off. That can actually be good to get a little bit of stress. It's just if it holds, you know, if you get a really low temp for a short time, or -2 or 3, but for a couple days,
Right.
it can ruin your weekend.
One of the things one of my friends recently, what we spoke about is he actually puts ice cubes in his beds near the end of harvest.
Oh,
to
yeah.
Think about like everything getting colder in nature. So he's trying to mimic that, obviously doing more of an indoor cultivation, but shocking the root system with cold
Interesting.
water, which was new to me. I was like, but I guess it does make sense, right? If you're getting rain in October, I mean, we get snow on October sometimes. So
Yeah, no, for sure.
it only makes sense. One of the things I feel like would be fun for us to do in the years to come as well is see the process of what you guys are doing, kind of from the ground up.
Yeah, I would love to take like a little
Yeah.
bit deeper dive into everything. And
I feel like the world really needs to see things like this. I truthfully believe that. So I was really excited to
make a
come here
movie
today
for
as
you
well.
or something.
Cool.
But obviously you guys are doing something special and different.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It'd be awesome for more people to see that. I guess that's kind of goes back to when we talked before we started recording, is building this platform to show people, like, how can we bring everybody to the same place, and then how can we filter out what kind of information we want to be giving in that space.
And just show all the different ways of doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's not one way.
Absolutely. I think that's the other big lesson, is that there's a number of methods out there. Again, I think it's if you get the right foundational paradigm, which you could just say simply is look at nature's model and try to do what you can to mimic it. And then you get all these different methods and you bounce them off of that filter. Like, can I see an example of this that exists in nature?
Mm-hmm.
We've never been steered wrong starting from that point.
I mean, we're here.
Yeah.
Living, right? So.
Yeah.
One of the questions I know that you always ask, which I like to ask as well, is terpenes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite terpene? Do you have a combination of terpenes you enjoy?
I don't know, like that. Yeah, that lemon pepper has a really nice profile.
Yeah. Literally like good for any single time of the day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. If I have to be honest with you, what I like the most is variety, like changing terpenes. You know what I
For
mean?
sure.
So it's like anything. It's almost like asking, like, what's your favorite food? I'm like, well, I mean, sometimes I like I just like steak, obviously, but
I take you for a steak guy.
yeah. Like, okay, a burger's good. Greasy pizza's nice sometimes too, and then, like, you know what I mean? There's just like
For sure.
all of these things are good, and if I had to eat only one of them every day, eventually I'd really, you know what I mean?
It's tough. And it's like you say as well, like I think you said to me one time that you try to not like consume 2 of the same strains back to back, like to mix up the terps each time.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
And when you're consuming copious amounts of cannabis, like
Sometimes you need to do it just to.
you do.
For that
You
tolerance.
do. And there's also times I find in my life where I don't want to change it up because I actually want to feel less of an effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'll smoke one thing for like 3 days because I know I have a really busy 3 days.
Yeah.
So I want to find like that baseline high, whereas I don't
That's
want to
interesting.
experience a new genetic to where I might be like, wait, I don't know if I want to work on this.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that happens to me sometimes.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So there's no specific terpene blend or specific, because we're super nerdy about this, and it's kind of goes along with how we do our reviews and stuff as well. But I've learned like terpenes that I don't like, and whether that's it's not flavor profile, but it's the effect that I think it may.
Oh, and you pinned it to the
produce.
specific terp.
Right. So terpinolene is something I really don't like.
Which is weird because I fucking love it with that osamine combination and limonene. It's just
interesting.
so uplifting, and I think that was the Miss Kim profile.
But we've also talked about it in the sense of obviously we're two different people, we're three different people.
Absolutely.
I'm very high strung all day, every single day. So I like a terpene combination that is like, let's come down a little bit, but not too far.
Yeah. And how'd you narrow it down? Like
to which terpenes?
To which terpenes?
I like limonene, but it has to be in conjunction with something else, because limonene is the creative, the energetic terpene that I don't really need. I tell people I am sativa, is what I say in store.
Right.
I need something to bring me down. So I find limonene with linalool or limonene with caryophyllene and myrcene.
Right.
The combination of those a lot of the times will bring me down just enough to feel the relaxation, but keep my mind creative to where I'm creating all day, every day. That's how I need to be. So I'd like to have that creative edge without the jitters that terpinolene brings me.
It's also like the ratios, like we're still fine tuning which ratios are the best. Because obviously you can have myrcene, caryophyllene, limonene in like 50 different cannabis cultivars, but the different ratios of each will make the difference.
Right. And who knows? We're just guessing as in what we see on the bag, but at the end of the day, we're trying, and I feel like this is like the THC conversation that I feel like is had far too often as well, but it's not just one thing. And I tell a lot of people are like, well, it's not the THC, it's the terps. I'm like, but it's not just the terps.
Yeah.
The terps will just become THC if you treat it that way.
Yeah.
And then somebody's going to come to the store. What do you have 5% terps or more?
Right.
And it's like, why?
Yeah.
I've had flower. One of my favorite flowers I've ever smoked from the recreational market is peanut butter souffle by Coast Mountain Cannabis.
It's like 1.7, 1.8, something like
Not even. I've seen it at 0.86.
Whoa.
And I find it to be an amazing flavor profile.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's one of the things I used to say actually is like, you almost can't just boil it all down to numbers. Like you actually have to smoke this product to understand.
Experience is everything with cannabis.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even like the way you consume, it's a completely different thing as well.
True. Because there's a lot of nuances to me to live resin and cured resin. A lot of people in America, and this is just through watching videos and hearing people talk about it, people actually like cured resin better because it's more like cannabis flower, versus live resin. With the live plant, you're getting a much different effect from it because you don't smoke the live plant.
Yeah.
So when you're consuming the live plant and the terpenes and everything that brings, it's completely different. I see all the little chipmunks running around everywhere, and it's the ecosystem's in full effect.
Love it.
Probably trying to bring back chicken feed from the garage.
I love it.
Yo, this has been a pleasure. Appreciate you for having us.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you guys came by. It was a ton of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate you.
I'm glad I made the trip out.
Yeah, 100%. I need to come stay in this Airbnb next year when it's
absolutely.
open up again.
Yeah.
I can bring my dog.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, dog friendly.
I'll talk to my girl, see if we can hook something up.
Yeah.
Let's do it, man.
Tours next week. Is the last week?
Yeah, last week for tours. So if you're, I guess if you've got your cancel, if you're a retailer, bud tender, Purple Hills offers tours of their facilities, and you make a stop at our farm. We show you basically how we make our soil, how we do our composting. We bring you into our grow. You see the cannabis. And then we go around the whole farm. We talk about the animal husbandry. We talk about the honeybees, the fruit orchard, the soil, and our approach to ecological management. So those run all year. We usually start up towards the end of July, and they do 2 days a week up until harvest.
Wow.
And so this next week, what are we? What's today? 25th?
Yes.
So
Yeah, so it'd be like
September.
27th, 28th. If you haven't signed up, you can probably still sign up now. If you're invited, you would have gotten an email.
Nice.
But check out, the tours are a lot of fun.
And then we go to the house as well, right?
Yeah. So across the road, the founder of Purple Hills, Peter Miller, is posted up right across the street from me.
Is he back?
And sorry?
Is he back?
Yeah, he just got back. It would do a barbecue for everybody, and then he's got an animal rescue there, so you visit the horses and the rabbits and everything. It's a pretty, I think it's a pretty special day. It's safe to say.
No,
You
it's
guys
amazing.
you guys have a solid community out here, man.
Yeah.
Super good to see.
Yeah, that's a good spot.
Just the vibe out here too, the environment. Like you just fall in love with this place.
He
Yeah.
told me that as soon as he left, by the way. He goes, I'm moving out there.
Nice. Yeah.
And this is coming from a guy that I thought was going to end up in the GTA.
No, man, that's not me. Never.
Yeah.
I thought it might happen.
I'm a earth being. I'm an earthly
There you
being.
go.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
Appreciate you guys for tuning in, man. We're gonna wrap this one up. As always, much love. Stay positive. We out.
Well, I heard out in the hills, they got pills to get their thrills, and they love their liquor down in New Orleans. Maybe for a New York minute, sugar cane will fit the bill, but in no time flat, you're out of what you need.